Do stabilizers help? Yes, they do. So I shot this. This is a Carbon Defiant Hoyt Carbon Defiant 34. I shot it for 3 years without having any stabilizer on the front. Um, it was just empty on the front, and it was really lightweight, 3.8 pounds. I got to the point where I could shoot good groups. 40 yards, I could keep them within a couple inches of each other. Um, 60 yards, I could keep it within the center um, insert in that target, so that's 8 or 10 inches. 70 yards, I could keep the arrows on the target, but they weren't grouping very well. Um, and so for accuracy, like I worked on my consistent grip pressure, I worked on a release, I worked on breathing techniques to be able to get the pin to settle down. And then just recently, I purchased these Conquest Archery Control Freak .5 stabilizers with smack is what they call it. And there's 3 ounces on the back. There's 3 ounces, sometimes around 2 ounces on the front. I went with longer bars. It's a 15-inch front bar, 12-inch back bar. However, a note on the links. Once you add the weights on the front, and I have a quick release system on there, that front bar is actually 18 inches in front of the bow. So it adds 3 inches if you have the quick release and 3 ounces of weight. So if you are one that shoots in 3D tournaments and you're in the hunter division, they only allow a 12 inches out in front of your bow. So you would, if you had the quick release system and the ounces, you would need to go with an 8-inch bar. 8 inches plus 3 is 11 inches total. If you don't have the quick release system, you could mount a 10-inch bar straight to your bow, and then it would add a 1.5 inches is what those weights add. And so you'd be at 11.5 inches if you were running a 10-inch bar. It's a little bit longer than a traditional hunting setup. However, if you like a spot and stock situation, the arrow coming off of my bow is longer than that stabilizer, so you would still have something sticking out pretty far in front of the bow. All right, so what does it do? Well, the name is very intuitive. It stabilizes your system. It doesn't fix form. It doesn't fix any release or your technique. However, it just makes things slow down and stabilize. The pin floats a lot slower. Sometimes it just sits there. The back stabilizer, I set it up so that when it's balanced, the bubble in my sight is not perfect in the middle. It's just off to the right. That lets me put a little bit of side pressure in my grip, and that pressure then puts the bubble in the middle. I'm hopeful that that's consistent. Like, it'll help me have my grip more consistent if I know that I need to get the bubble just to move very slightly into the center of the housing rather than having it perfectly balanced. The post-shot feel is really good. Beforehand, the bow jumps a little bit forward out in the post-shot, and beforehand the bow would sometimes go a little to the right or to a little bit to the left. But now with the added weights that are farther away from the bow, changing the center of mass, the post shot is much more consistent. I set it up so that it slightly falls forward, not much at all, but a little bit forward after the shot, and it's a lot more consistent in the direction that it's falling. So I put these on, started shooting, and shots were going really well at 40 yards. So I said, I'm going to back up to 70. So again, beforehand, I could keep the arrows on that target at 70 yards, the target that was behind there, but I couldn't group them very well. Well, the first set of 3 arrows with these stabilizers were touching at 70 yards. They grouped within 1.5, 2 inches. They were literally touching all 3 arrows. And I was amazed. I'd never shot that well at 70 yards before. Could have been part psychological, sure. Whenever you add something to your bow that you think is going to help, you sometimes shoot better. However, I shot several rounds and they weren't always touching, but they were grouping way better than I had grouped before. And I think it's just because the bow is settled down, the pin's not floating. My one thought that makes me hesitant is I'm actually glad I waited to put these stabilizers on after a few years of shooting, because I really did work on my grip and my release and even in breathing techniques to get that pin, so I can shoot it right when my breath and my body is most calm. I don't know if I would have done all that if I would have put stabilizers on at the beginning. They can hide some flaws a little bit. They make it more forgiving, which is great in a tournament setting or in a hunting setting. But I don't want it to hide some of my flaws. So I don't know. I still might shoot the bow without the stabilizers on it sometimes, um, just to work on more of my technique. Um, but has it improved my groups? Most definitely.